Alright, so this is a suggestion via Patreon. The name of the video is Bone-Chilling Titanic Facts No One Knew. Let's check it out. Really quickly though, guys. So I know a little bit about the Titanic, the RMS Titanic, with the Royal Mail ship. Titanic, or the Royal Mail steamer. Basically, the Titanic was originally meant to like carry mail for the most part. Then it was just basically changed into some like luxury cruise liner for the most part. Also, I know there's a movie. I haven't seen a movie. I have a movie reaction channel, and I know I'll eventually be watching the movie. But that's about all I can tell you about the Titanic, guys. That's it.
Hello, everyone. If you ask your
But definitely let's learn something.
friends what's the most famous ship in history, the answer in most cases will be the same. Of course, the legendary Titanic. Its history is full of mysteries. At first, it was a source of hope and national pride, as well as proof of the triumph of mankind. But it soon became a source of nostalgia and pain.
What's funny about the Titanic, in terms of the size at least, this image that we see here on the screen is like depicting the Titanic in a like extremely large. Don't get me wrong, it was large for the time, right? But compared to right now, that ship is that was tiny, guys. Compared to now,
extent of which cannot be described in
tiny,
words. The day the Titanic sank underwater will forever remain one of the most painful days in human history. And although more than 100 years have passed since the tragic event, no one has forgotten about it, and people are still interested in the transatlantic liner. Today, we will tell you some facts about the Titanic that will surprise you.
All right, let's go. Guys, I am definitely ready to hear something I don't know, guys.
Everyone could have been saved. On April 14th, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic hit an iceberg, receiving fatal damage. A couple of hours later, at 2:20 a.m., the ship split in two, and within minutes, sank completely. During all that time, the ship sent out distress signals that did not go unnoticed. The ocean liner RMS Carpathia rushed to the site of the wreck at full speed, but unfortunately arrived an hour and a half later. All the crew of the Carpathia could do was to pick up the 710 survivors of the shipwreck. But the story could have been very different. Only after some time, it became known that the ocean liner RMS Carpathia was not the closest ship to the Titanic. Around 12:45 a.m. on that terrible night, the officers of the Titanic noticed the lights of another ship in the distance. It was the SS Californian, but the ship did not respond to the calls for help.
What? Guys, that's. I thought that if you were at like sea, it was almost, maybe it's just like a customary thing to respond if someone needs some type of assistance at sea, but to completely ignore like an SOS is wild to me, guys. Why would they have done that? Hopefully they answer yes.
The captain of the Titanic tried desperately to get his colleagues' attention by firing white flares. It may seem surprising, but the watch officers of the SS Californian saw every single one of them. The crew immediately woke the captain, but unfortunately, he did not give it any importance. The only radio operator who could receive the distress call was asleep at the time. The SS Californian decided that the flares were just a signal from an unknown ship that had stopped on the ice. So the passenger ship, which was very close, simply passed by. Today, experts agree that the SS Californian could have saved many, or perhaps all of the lives that were lost.
I definitely hope that captain absolutely no longer had his job after this day.
That night, that is, over 1,500 people. Right. The victims remain unknown. Of course, every global tragedy is followed by a large number of complex and very thorough investigations. If you look at the official figures, it turns out there were 1,514 victims of the shipwreck. But the truth is much more complicated. The exact number of victims is actually not known. It could be 1,490 or 1,635. Moreover, the investigations weren't very useful. So far, no one knows the names of all the people who died on the Titanic. When the bodies were recovered from the bottom of of the ocean, it was discovered that many passengers were traveling under false names. Also, there were too many people, all from different places, and the lists of survivors were made amidst the panic of the catastrophe. Not surprisingly, it was impossible to identify each person. You can visit the Fairview Cemetery in the city of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. More than 100 victims of the Titanic are buried there. About 30 of them still don't have names. Surprisingly, investigations are still ongoing. In 2008, for example, one of these graves finally got a name. Extensive DNA testing and a worldwide genealogical search helped identify the body of a 19-month-old baby. The unnamed body, 96 years later, has recovered its name, Sidney Leslie Goodwin. Not enough lifeboats. When designing a transport vehicle, great attention is paid to the safety of the passengers. Engineers and designers do everything possible to ensure that as many people as possible can be saved in the event of an accident. But in the case of the Titanic, something went wrong. Very wrong. When it was launched, the Titanic was the largest ship in the world. It could hold a total of 3,547 people. That's an incredible number. Fortunately, when the Titanic made its first voyage, there were fewer people on board. According to official data, there were 2,224 registered passengers. And now, for the most interesting part. The original plan was for the Titanic to carry 48 lifeboats. However, the owners of the liner insisted that their number be reduced to 20. The capacity of each lifeboat was about 60 people. A simple mathematical calculation allows us to discover that only 1,200 people could have been saved. Only a little more than half of the passengers. Why weren't more lifeboats installed? The official reason is that they would have taken up too much space on the deck, blocking the passages and covering up the beautiful view of the ocean. So, appearance and comfort were placed above the safety of people. To be fair, the ship was considered unsinkable. No one expected it to sink so easily. Everyone thought that even with damage, the Titanic could stay afloat for a long time. In other words, the immediate and simultaneous evacuation of all passengers was not considered a possible situation. The drill was canceled. There is a thing known as a lifeboat drill. During a drill, the crew perfects the skills of preparation of the boat.
This is like one of the most unfortunate situations in human history, guys. Like, I understand people are paying their money and you want them to probably take this trip again, this voyage again, right? So what you do is you want to make it look as pleasant as humanly possible. And of course, you're on the unsinkable ship. So why would you need so many? Guys, that's not an excuse, guys. I'm sorry. Safety should have definitely come first in this instance.
They're launching and control. In addition, passengers are prepared for possible evacuation. They learn to evacuate while remaining calm. And in case of emergency, they understand better how to behave and don't.
Are these clips from the movie? Because I hope not. I hope this is not like clips from the movie. I do see a lot of famous people, guys. If it is, a couple of little spoilers, guys. Little spoilers.
Fall victim to panic.
Yeah, 100% the movie, guys.
Ideally, these exercises should
because they got scoring.
Take place once a week. The Titanic sailed on April 10th, so it's not surprising that the drill was scheduled for April 14th.
How long is it?
But for some mysterious reason, it was canceled. To this day, no one knows why Captain Smith chose not to conduct the drill. Perhaps he was too confident, or perhaps he thought that since there were only 3 days left to travel, it wasn't necessary. Either way, the decision cost a lot of people their lives. The passengers, as well as the crew, were not prepared for an emergency evacuation. That's why some boats designed for 60 people, in some cases, were launched only half full. Musicians played until the end. Although the Titanic boasted an amazing size and capacity, it also stood out for its interior decoration. Luxuriously furnished living rooms, reading and smoking halls, and a gymnasium. All this was at the service of the first-class passengers. The crew included a large number of cooks, waiters, bakers, and of course, musicians. 8 people to be exact. Here's a quote from a second-class passenger who was lucky enough to escape from the Titanic. Many brave things were done that night, but none were more brave than those done by men playing minute after minute as the ship settled quietly lower and lower in the sea. Despite the fear, trouble, and panic, despite knowing that their lives were about to come to an end, these brave men held their instruments in their hands and continued to play until the end, until the last second.
Why would they do that? Like, I'm honestly trying to picture this mentally. Like, why exactly would they do that rather than attempting to save their life? I mean, I get it. There was only a finite amount of space on these lifeboats. My brain just shut off for a second. Apologies. So they only had like a finite amount of space on the lifeboats. I get it. Maybe they, as staff, would not have gotten in anyway, right? But I'm sure you could have at least held onto the sides or done something to try to save your life to the very end, rather than just succumbing.
They knew that music calmed people, made the tragedy less terrible, and therefore they could not stop. None of the 8 musicians survived. Only 3 bodies were found. The youngest of them was 21 years old. Tragedy could have been avoided. David Blair is a very lucky man. He was supposed to be the second officer on the Titanic, but at the last second, he was pulled out. This incident saved his life, which should have made him incredibly happy, but something clouded his joy, because maybe he was the only person who could have saved the Titanic.
Right.
How? 100 years ago,
Feels like survivor's guilt.
ships were not equipped with smart, advanced technology like they are today. To see a threat on the horizon, people had to keep an eye out. Binoculars were of great help, but here's the problem. The crew of the Titanic had no access to the room where the binoculars were kept, because David Blair was responsible for the keys. He left the ship in a hurry, and he simply forgot to return the key. He left it in his pocket. If the crew had access to the binoculars...
Okay, yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's definitely a case of survivor's guilt. Probably a classic case of it, guys. Oh no, guys.
They would have noticed the iceberg in advance. The ship would have had time to change course. Hundreds of people would have remained alive, but the Titanic seemed to attract bad luck. A series of coincidences and mistakes led to disaster, a fate from which it could not escape. Miss Unsinkable. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, White Star Line was considered the largest shipping company in the world. In 1907, its owners decided to build 3 huge ocean liners. As you may have guessed, the Titanic was one of them. The other ships were the Olympic and the Gigantic, later named Britannic. No matter how huge and luxurious these incredible ships were, all their stories ended in tragedy. These 3 are rightly considered the most famous ships in history. There are many books and films telling their story, but there is something they all have in common, or to be precise, someone. Violet Constance Jessup. Born in Argentina, this unremarkable stewardess is known as Miss Unsinkable. On September 20th, 1911, the ship Olympic crashed with the cruiser Hawk. The incident, fortunately, left no victims. Violet was on board the ocean liner at the time. When the Titanic hit an iceberg, she was also on board. Luckily, she was able to get to a lifeboat. And finally, during World War I, Violet served as a nurse with the British Red Cross. She was sent aboard the Britannic, which was then a hospital ship. On November 21st, 1916, the huge ship was blown up by a mine, but Violet survived the accident. Now do you understand why she's Miss Unsinkable? By the way, the woman originally did not want to work for White Star Line, but her friends convinced her to work on the Titanic, assuring her that it would be a great recommendation in the future. We don't know whether to call Violet Constance Jessup lucky or not. Let's just say that this series of incidents is somewhat mysterious and curious.
Yeah, I can definitely tell you right now that she most likely is one of the luckiest humans to exist.
The engineer's sacrifice. We have already talked about the large number of crew members on board the Titanic. Now let's focus on this fact, and at the same time, pay tribute to the people who did everything possible to save others. About 900 crew members worked on the Titanic. Less than a third survived. Among the victims were all the engineers. That's because they simply didn't have time to save their lives. 25 engineers, 6 electrical engineers, 2 boiler makers, a plumber, and a clerk. While there was panic and fear on the deck, they stayed down in the boiler rooms. They needed to keep them running so that there would be electricity and the pumps would continue to pump the water. They were fighting against death for every inch of the ship. The engineers didn't want to give up, and most of them probably didn't know that they were only delaying the disaster and that it was not possible to prevent it. Yet these people remain an example of courage, bravery, and devotion. In the city of Southampton, on the south coast of Britain, there is a memorial in their honor. That's all for today. See you soon.
I would say that's probably the best thing out of all of this here. the fact that at least they built something to remember the people that at least tried to do something to prevent it. I definitely feel bad for the guy who definitely has, like, he obviously is suffering from some type of survivor's guilt. That's troubling. I can admit I don't know a lot. I don't know too much about the Titanic. I know enough, right? But none of these things are anything that I can definitely say that I've heard before. Well, no. The lifeboat thing, I think I knew for the most part they didn't have enough. I just didn't know why they didn't have enough. Now I do. So that's a really good thing here. But all right, listen, let me know in the comments, though, the next type of thing or any type of subject matter we should be checking out, and I will. Listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day and enjoy your day thoroughly.